Today we're going to solve quadratic equations, which is not anything new, but the last time we solved quadratic equations, we solved by factoring. When you have x squared and x in the same equation, you need to solve by factoring or by another method that we're going to learn eventually. If all you have is plain x squared, you can solve using square roots. So when you're looking at an equation and you see that you just have x squared in that equation, no x, you can get that x squared by itself and then solve using square roots. So we want to get this x squared by itself. What do we need to do first? Plus 6. That would give us 4x squared equals 48. And then we would divide by 4. So x squared equals 12. Now we're not completely done because we don't want to know what x squared equals, we want to know what x equals. Does anyone remember how to undo a square? Square root. Now there's this tiny little rule. If you have to put a square root into an equation in the process of solving, you must also put a plus minus in front of it. We'll talk about why in a second. Just trust me for now, and then I'll explain it. Okay, so x equals, can we simplify the square root of 12? Okay, using what we did yesterday, we can break 12 into the square root of 4 times the square root of 2. Nope, square root of 3. The square root of 4 is 2, so it's 2 times the square root of 3 with that plus minus in front of it. Okay, side note. What is the square root of 9? 3. Why is the square root of 9 3? Because 3 times 3 is 9. Is there another number that you can multiply times itself and still get positive 9? Negative 3. So really the square root of 9 can be positive 3 or negative 3. If the square root is given to us in the problem, we always assume the positive root. But if we have to insert that square root into the equation, we have to take into account both the positive and the negative root. So when you put a square root in, you have to put a plus minus in front of it. All right, let's look at number 2. What would you do first? Subtract 3. So negative 5x squared equals negative 12. Divide by negative 5. X squared equals positive 12 fifths. And I would leave it as that fraction because yesterday we learned how to deal with radicals with fractions, so we can totally do this. No big deal. To get rid of the square, we square root and stick a plus minus in there. So off to the side, I would think about, I'm just going to kind of go up here, the square root of 12 over the square root of 5. I can simplify the square root of 12. We just did that in example 1. So I have 2 times the square root of 3 over the square root of 5. Can we leave our answer looking like that? No. We need to multiply by the square root of 5 over the square root of 5. On the top, we will have 2 times the square root of 15. On the bottom, the square root of 5 times the square root of 5 is the square root of 25, which is 5. So our final answer is x equals plus or minus 2 times the square root of 15 over 5. All right, I want you to try number 4 on your own. It's actually a lot easier than it looks. Try number 4 on your own, pause the video, give it a try. So I added 2 on both sides, then multiplied both sides by 6 to undo the divided by 6, We have x squared equals 12. I want pink. Square root both sides. Don't forget the plus minus. The square root of 12 is the square root of 4 times the square root of 3. Are you sick of seeing the square root of 12 yet today? X equals positive or negative 2 times the square root of 3. Let's look at number 3. Some of you maybe have tried this on your own already, which is totally fine. Start by subtracting 7. Is that 16? No. And then we divide by 4. Then we square root. Don't forget the plus minus. Before you try to simplify the square root of 4, do you notice that 4 is on our list of perfect squares? Yeah. The square root of 4 is 2. So x equals positive or negative 2. Okay, the other type that we're going to talk about today is when we have parentheses squared. There's a couple super important things with parentheses squared. The first thing is that you are not allowed to distribute. Oops. Trying to be all like super intense and I end up just there we go. So seriously, don't distribute. The square on the parentheses is like a lock on a shed. The x plus 5 is inside the shed, and until that square is gone, you cannot enter the shed. It is locked shut. You cannot get in there. So we have to get rid of the 1/3 some other way. How do we get rid of times 1/3? Multiply by 3. So we have x plus 5 squared equals 21. Once the parentheses are completely by themselves, no number in front, no number added or subtracted after, now you can get rid of that padlock by square rooting both sides. The square root takes away the square, leaving us with just x plus 5 on the left. On the right, we would need to think about, can we simplify the square root of 21? 16, 9, 4, no. So it stays the square root of 21. Does this look done? How do we get x by itself? Subtract 5. When we subtract 5, we are going to put that negative 5 in front of that plus minus. So x is going to be negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 21. Now, if I asked you to take this original problem, 1/3 times x plus 5 squared equals 7, and graph that and tell me where does that cross the x-axis, you could figure that out by plugging this into a calculator. You'd have to do negative 5 plus the square root of 21. So one of our answers is negative 0.42. Then negative 5 minus the square root of 21. Your other answer would be negative 9.6, approximately. So there are two answers here. One of them uses the plus, the other uses the minus. But we don't want decimal approximations. We want to leave that nicely as negative 5 plus or minus the square root of 21. All right, number 6. What should we do first?
Add 6.
Add 6. Now what? Divide by 2. Even though this says do not distribute, were any of you tempted to distribute? Make sure that you don't. Don't distribute. Don't do it. So x plus 5 squared equals 9. Now we can square root. What is the square root of 9?
3 plus or minus.
Plus or minus 3. This time when we subtract 5, we will end up with x equals negative 5 plus or minus 3. In example 5, we couldn't actually combine those together because negative 5 is a whole number and 21 is a radicand. But here, negative 5 and 3 are both whole numbers. So we can do this. You do this problem once using the addition symbol. What is negative 5 plus 3? Negative 2. And then you do this problem again using the minus sign. Negative 5 minus 3, negative 8. So if they are both whole numbers, you can combine them. Just do the problem twice, once using plus, the other time using minus. Okay, let's do number 7 fairly quickly. Multiply by 2. So x plus 8 squared equals 28. So I need to simplify the square root of 28. What numbers should we break it into? 4, 7. So 2 square root of 7. X plus 8 equals positive or negative 2 times the square root of 7. Just like we did on the others, we will subtract 8 and put it in front of the plus minus. So x equals negative 8 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 7. Negative 8 and 2 are the same kind of number, but 2 is being multiplied by the square root of 7, and multiplication has more power than addition. So you can't add before you multiply. We can't simplify this anymore. This is our final answer. Negative 8 plus or minus 2 times the square root of 7.